Hi everybody, my name is Justin Clay from the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, Georgia campus, and I'm here to present on plant nutrition. So what are nutrients? A nutrient is a compound derived from various sources of energy that is implemented into an organism's metabolic needs. So we have macronutrients and micronutrients, and these are based on the different masses needed by the organism. So a macronutrient is one that is required of at least 1 gram per kilogram of plant. A micronutrient, on the other hand, is required by the plant in at least 0.1 gram per kilogram of plant. So we know that these nutrients are incorporated into the organism and they serve a purpose within the organism. But what purpose do they serve? They serve as a source of energy. So light is essential for the growth of a plant. Some other essential nutrients required are macronutrients and micronutrients. The macronutrients are carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. And these are all found in different sources: the air, soil, and water. The micronutrients, on the other hand, are all found in the soil. This includes chlorine, iron, manganese, boron, zinc, sodium, and copper. And we'll go into a little bit more detail in some of these. So it's also important to mention limiting factors. So some limiting factors in plant growth are light, CO2, and water. And these are limiting because they are absolutely vital to plant growth. If the plant is unable to get CO2, for example, it must resort to other sources like carbohydrate sources in order to meet the metabolic needs for growth. Like any other organism, the plant is capable of undergoing adaptations to meet its metabolic needs. Chlorophyll is one example of this. Chlorophyll is used to absorb light. It's a green substance found on the leaves, and in certain environments like deserts, high-intensity sunlight can damage the layer of chlorophyll, which is called the mesophyll layer. Tall trees with a lot of leaves have adapted a way of providing sunlight to all of the leaves by making some of the leaves thinner, and this allows hidden leaves to obtain proper amounts of sunlight. So why is carbon dioxide important? Most of the matter of a plant comes from carbon dioxide, and there's actually a layer of water on the surface of the leaves of plants that serves as a solvent for the absorption of CO2. And the equation for CO2 incorporation is identical to what occurs within the human body. So this equation should look very familiar. We have CO2 plus H2O, which is being incorporated into carbonic acid by Rubisco. So the name of the enzyme doing that above the first arrow is called Rubisco. And then we're getting bicarbonate and a hydrogen ion. So the rate of photosynthesis will increase with increasing CO2 concentrations until the enzyme metabolizing CO2 is saturated. So when Rubisco is saturated, it can't, and an increase in CO2 is not going to affect the rate of photosynthesis. So to continue on with the importance of carbon dioxide, CO2 is obviously a major limiting factor for plants in nature. It can reduce agriculture productivity because certain plants can't obtain the maximal amount of CO2. And shockingly, oxygen can actually compete with CO2 for the enzyme Rubisco, as we explained on the slide before, which incorporates CO2 to make carbonic acid. So oxygen can therefore limit the metabolism of CO2. Low levels of water in plants also limit the metabolism of CO2. So we explained that earlier, how water serves as a solvent on the leaves. So if we don't have enough water, the plant is not able to incorporate as much CO2. So this often occurs in desert environments. So in order to account for low CO2 incorporation into the plant, C4 photosynthesis occurs. And instead of using Rubisco as most plants do, this plant uses phosphoenolpyruvate carboxylase, which binds CO2 much more efficiently than Rubisco does. So CO2 incorporates into organic carbon molecules inside the Calvin cycle, so that's where the plant uses CO2. So obviously water is also important to the plant, and it serves as a source of hydrogen and oxygen. It allows for CO2 to be absorbed on the leaf, so we talked about in the previous slide. It serves as a solvent, so lower water levels are going to contribute towards lower CO2 levels. And it can also serve as a solvent for other minerals as well. So the importance of soil. So soil is obviously critical for the plant. It provides water for the plant for one, and it also provides other minerals. Microorganisms within the soil contribute to the richness of the soil. So when we see darker soil, as we might see in the next slide, this is because the microorganisms are decomposing organic compounds and inorganic compounds. So if we see darker soil, that's because there's a higher concentration of these compounds. And we might often see this in rainforests. The layers of soil, which is also on the next slide, that's based on the differences in composition. So we have the topsoil, which is obviously at the top. Then we have the subsoil, the soil base, and the bedrock at the bottom. And this is explained right here. So we have the topsoil right here at the top, and the bedrock on the bottom. So continue on with the importance of soil. We have a couple important processes to highlight. One is weathering, which is the erosion of rocks, and this contributes to the inorganic composition of soil. It's going to add minerals to the soil for the plants. And then we have leaching. Leaching is kind of the opposite of weathering in a way. It's going to remove some of these minerals from the soil. So when we get heavy downfalls of rain, this is actually going to take away some of the nutrients from the soil. So as important as water is for plants, it can also be harmful if there's too much downfall of rain, and this is going to take away some of those nutrients. However, soil with a high clay composition is going to contain a lot of anions. So these negatively charged anions are going to bind tightly to divalent cation minerals, such as calcium. So if you look at a periodic table, you can see which ions are divalent. Calcium is a major one in plants. Calcium serves as a signaling molecule in plants. So this clay composition is actually going to keep some of the minerals in the soil. So why is nitrogen important for plant growth? Well, for one, it's a limiting factor in plant growth. It's required for the synthesis of proteins and nucleotides. So obviously amino acids need nitrogen, so in order to make proteins for the plant, it needs a source of nitrogen. And this is obtained by plants in the form of NH3, NH4+, or NO3-. And these are all examples of fixed nitrogen. So this is an important concept right here, that these are the forms of fixed nitrogen. So what does fixed nitrogen mean? Well, microorganisms are capable of oxidizing NH4+ to NO3-. And to continue on with fixed nitrogen on the next slide. So plants are going to uptake nitrogen through the plasma membrane and then through the xylem. And then the nitrogen can either be stored or used. So going on with nitrogen fixation, hydrogen gas and nitrogen gas from the atmosphere are going to combine together. So this occurs in biological cycles as well as industry. And there's a picture later on in the PowerPoint presentation to kind of highlight those concepts. So microorganisms are going to perform the biological aspect of nitrogen fixation. So cyanobacteria are the specific type of microorganisms that are going to be performing this job, and they use an enzyme called nitrogenase. So this fixed nitrogen is going to be transferred to the plants from the microorganisms. So to highlight the steps of nitrogen fixation, step 1 is the N2 is going to bind to the nitrogenase enzyme. Step 2, the reduction of this N2 occurs by addition of 2 hydrogens. And this uses ATP, and this step is going to occur 3 times, producing in step 3 2 molecules of NH3. And these 2 molecules of NH3 are then released. and these molecules are going to form ammonium ions by dissolving in water. So to use nitrogen, it must be in the form of ammonium ion. So nitrate reductase and nitrite reductase are going to reduce ammonium sources to this NH4 plus ammonium ion. And then this enzyme right here is going to sound familiar, glutamine synthetase, and this is going to convert ammonium ion to glutamine. Obviously, humans have glutamine synthetase as well. So here is a picture talking about the nitrogen cycle, leaching, which is what we talked about. This is taking away some of the nutrients from the soil, as well as fertilizers. So some other important nutrients. Calcium, which we mentioned earlier, serves as a signaling molecule in plants, and it's also a component of cell walls. Magnesium is a part of chlorophyll. So obviously chlorophyll is critical to the health of a plant. So magnesium is definitely essential. Some plants also contain sulfur. Some nutrient deficiency symptoms. So if the plant is not obtaining these nutrients, it's going to experience the following symptoms. Chlorosis, which is when the leaves turn a yellowish color. And this is because the chlorophyll requires certain nutrients. If it's not getting these nutrients, it's not going to be able to produce that green chlorophyll color. And this results in the loss of leaves when it also doesn't obtain some nutrients. And certain plants are going to require different nutrients based on what environment they live in. Here is a picture of chlorosis, so we can see the yellowing of the leaves. And that is all for the PowerPoint presentation on plant nutrition. I thank you guys for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you very much.